And maybe can you take us back to 2011?
So, how this starts, it's actually almost 2010. Emerson Mnangagwa has been planning to be president for a long time, since 2002, thereabouts. He gets found out when the Choloto declaration happens and Jonathan Moyo pays for it. But behind the scenes, he continues investing into this thing. He wants to be president. And he starts to move his chess pieces. And one of the biggest things he does is he accelerates the promotion of Chiwenga to go even above officers who are slightly senior than him and pushes for him to eventually become the commander. On the side, he has a task force. This task force has people like Senator Maofa, the late. It has Joram Gumbo. It has July Moyo. And they meet bi-weekly at July Moyo's farm in Kwekwe. So when they meet, this is around about the time where there's tension between Emerson Mnangagwa and Joyce Mjuru. And at that time, Grace Mugabe is even on Emerson Mnangagwa's side. And in a meeting, they discuss the intelligence report that has made Robert Mugabe change his mind about Joyce Mjuru. Because till 2010, Mugabe was quite clear he wanted Mjuru to take over. And then he changes his mind. And he changes his mind because there's an intelligence report that says Joyce Mjuru is buying black chickens in bulk. She's killing them halal style, draining the blood, mixing it with menstruation blood, and then she's doing a ritual to accelerate Mugabe's death. And by that time, Mugabe is going 90, by the way. But nonetheless, that's the argument. She wants Mugabe to die quickly so she can take over. So Mugabe is pissed off that, well, she's not patient. And he then switches to say, you know what, I want Mnangagwa to take over. But Mnangagwa's task force, with your July Moyo and Joram Gumbo, they see this and think, if the CIO can do this to Mjuru, they can very well do this to Mnangagwa. So basically, that's how it starts in the 2010s.
Wow. And what then happened when CIO was flagged?
Okay, so on that particular weekend, I was fortunate to find out, to speak to somebody who was driving July Moyo at the time. And he says, they're meant to meet on a Sunday. But for some reason, either Mnangagwa leaves early to go back to Harare, or July Moyo arrives late. But either way, when July Moyo gets to the farm in Kwekwe, Edie's not there. And he has to phone him. And Edie's motorcade has to turn back from, I think they said it was in Kadoma at the time. And he comes back. And they flag to say, something needs to be done about the CIO because this can potentially be a banana skin. It can be a banana skin for you. And ED basically with his team start working on, should you get into power, how do we reform this? Now, why this is critical is Zimbabwe's intelligence is not like the intelligence of the UK or the USA. It's not about national interest. The mandate of the CIO is to protect presidential interests. That's the first and foremost mandate. That's that. Everything else comes out second. So when they say national security, they're talking about the president's interests. So Mugabe's got this machine that he's built. It's headed by Bonyongo at the time. Everyone from you, people heading the CIO at district level, provincial level, they're all Mugabe's guys. And the operatives are also Mugabe's guys. And they flagged them to say, these guys could give us a problem and we need to change. But this sort of takes the back burner because at the time, ED thinks, I've got Grace Mugabe on my side, this will be easy. Events change later on when he loses the support of Grace Mugabe and ultimately relies on the military. But he never forgets that report. He never forgets that report from his task force that the CIO needs to be reformed. And during the time that he's vice president, he strikes up a very good relationship with Isaac Moyo. Isaac Moyo at the time is the ambassador for Zimbabwe to South Africa. And while he's ambassador, Isaac introduces these incredible reforms at the Foreign Affairs Department heading the South African mission, where they don't believe in violence, they don't believe in intimidation. He starts to dine with the enemy, as you call it. So Isaac Moyo entertains people from the opposition, both South African opposition and Zimbabwean opposition, activists. At the time, there's even protests that are held frequently in Pretoria and as well as in London. And these protests are basically anti-ZANU-PF protests. But he brings these people in, he nullifies them, he builds intelligence, and he starts to act. And Mnangagwa sees that and thinks this could be one way to reform the CIO slowly. And that is why when Mnangagwa gets into power, he brings in Isaac Moyo. And he brings in Isaac Moyo and he wants him to do one version of intelligence, which is do what you did in South Africa. I want you to do it in Harare.
What was that?
And that was reform the CIO and create a CIO that is different from the one that served Mugabe. Not different in terms of interest, but different in terms of operations and its operational capacity. And Isaac starts to do that. He's a man, he's a giant in intelligence. He believes in intelligence, doesn't believe in violence. He starts to push the agenda of infiltration. And we see that with Mwanzora. We see that with Chabangu. That is the CIO at work, playing for him. That's Isaac Moyo for you. Infiltrate, no violence. In fact, when he gets to the CIO, he implements quite a lot of changes. Some of the changes that he brings in, which are, first, he says officers must justify the use of force. So a member of the CIO cannot even slap a civilian without having to write a report about why he did that. He can't pull out his service weapon. He can't intimidate anyone. In fact, he even bans CIO officers from leaving the headquarters with their IDs. Now, under Mugabe's time, that was the thing. CIO people put flash IDs. CIO is insecurity, that kind of thing. Isaac bans all of that, and he believes in infiltration. And for the most part, you'd say from an intelligence perspective, the argument of those that support him and himself is that this works.
And we saw that in Zimbabwe, and we actually thought maybe Emerson Mnangagwa is the toothless bulldog.
Yeah, look, so the CIO definitely mellows down a lot when Isaac Moyo is at the helm. And he tries to build this new intelligence branch that only uses violence as a last resort. He wants to gather intelligence. And it immediately leads to tension. Like you say, he's seen as a toothless bulldog. And that is something that comes from some sectors in the military, especially the January 19 protests, which came quite just like not long after the August 1 shootings. And those protests result in the loss of life. And they blame Isaac. They say, you and your boss, you're too soft. You need to rule with an iron fist. But at the time, the argument of the people that support Isaac is that the CIO is doing his job. They've gotten Mwanzora to practically steal the party away from Chamisa. And he does it again with Chabangu, and they steal the party again. So it's toothless in that there's no fight in it. There's no bodies that are piling up. But he's getting the results. But that observation that you say the people make is not very far from the observation that people within the intelligence community and within the defense cluster also make. They start to say, this guy is a diplomat. He's not an operative. And there's one particular thing that happens in 2020, which is what sets alarm bells throughout the Joint Operations Command, which is some junior directors come up with a report. COVID is just hit. There's lockdowns all across the world. And they say, look, this is a perfect opportunity to kill Nelson Chamisa. They're not saying he should get shot in the head, but they talk about we could infect people around him with COVID. We could do something to get him in the hospital. We could take him out, and there's a legitimate reason because leaders are dying everywhere from COVID. But Isaac says no. He says, I'm not going to authorize that. He doesn't believe in that. He thinks it's unnecessary. And that leads to tension because that idea has quite a lot of support. You've got people saying, if COVID had happened when Tsvangirai was at his most potent, that would have been a perfect excuse. So that's something that he then carries for the rest of his tenure throughout. And in Isaac's defense, I don't speak for him, but I speak about what I know. Isaac believes he is in good books with the president at the time because there's a private conversation at a private visit where the president says to him, don't meddle too much. I think I've got enough support. I can beat Chamisa on my own. There's no need for meddling. There's no need for any dirty tricks. And Isaac takes that as an instruction. But junior officers say it's reckless because they say, you can't listen to the president. He's not the head of intelligence. You will walk him into an election loss. In 2008, Mugabe was told he was going to win and he lost. So they said, no, that's irresponsible as a leader. And obviously refusing to take out Chamisa, that creates significant problems. But Isaac still retains the support of the president. He believes he's there to perform a reform agenda. And he thinks, they're still traveling on the same spectrum.
So how did then Isaac lose it?
So Isaac doesn't quite lose it per se, but he starts to face a lot of resistance around the 2022 period. And he approaches the president and offers to resign. Says, I think I've done what you asked me to do. I've reformed this thing, But the president says, I still need you, because Mnangagwa appreciates what Isaac's done. And they're still very close. The two of them are not having problems at the time. But Isaac is persistently being hammered by junior directors. And that is also a fault of his own, because, so this is how security protocol works. If you're a junior director, you don't speak to the president. If you're a deputy, you don't speak to the president. You speak to the director. He takes whatever you have to say to the president, right? As the Director General of the CIO, outside of the Joint Operations Command security briefs that they hold on Mondays, he also has scheduled meetings on Tuesdays after cabinet, where he gives the president what's called his weekly security debrief. And that is what your Bonyongwe's before or prior to that, there was, before Bonyongwe, there was Mzonzini, I think. It was the same thing. The boss tells the president. Isaac, how he had run the Zimbabwean embassy was, he believes in empowering his juniors. So he creates this system where his deputies can have debriefs with the president alone. He creates this situation where if a director wants to run a program and he's competent, he allows them to run with it, because he believes things are better off coming from the horse's mouth. That's what he believes. But it introduces a direct line of communication that allows his juniors to start submitting rogue reports. Now, some of his juniors are people he found in the CIO, people who had been there during Juru's time. So the rogue reports start to come. The president starts getting debriefed, for example, that Isaac is working against him. There's all of these reports that Isaac he's too nice to be the director general. He's inefficient, he's ineffective, he's incompetent. There's a lot of reports that come out, and it starts to hammer Isaac. And I think his rigidness in terms of his approach to security and to diplomacy ultimately is what then creates that situation where there's persistent reports to say this guy is not good enough. But why I was saying I don't know if I can say he's lost it is because when we go back to 2022, he actually wants to leave because he had asked for 5 years to reform. He thinks I've reformed the CIO, but at the time, it's too close to the election and they'll try and find somebody. And throughout all of this, when the president is going to change him, Isaac is aware, of a shortlist, and he's actually aware of the person that might replace him. And he supports the move all throughout to the end. And when it happens, he leaves the big smile on his face because he says, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I've reformed the CIO. You don't get CIOs running around town threatening people. They don't intimidate people anymore. They don't flash their IDs. So he leaves thinking, I've done what I needed to do. And you look at Chabangu and you look at Monzora, that's twice that the CIO, without the need of violence, have outsmarted the opposition.
And in the article, you talked about FAS being a project of the CIO.
Yes. Now, I know they've denied this, and I know Brigadier Tapumane has, he's also said, retired Brigadier General Tapumane, he said that he wasn't part of it, but that's just not true. So, Tapumane has this idea of running Forever Associates Zimbabwe, and they're basically a parallel structure to the CIO. They are doing campaigning in the grounds in the way that CIO should, working together with ZANU-PF. Because you've got attachés at the CIO that are within the ZANU-PF party. You've got attachés that are attached to the police and so forth. And Isaac allows Tapumane to run FAS, and a significant amount of the electoral budget goes to FAS. And Tapumane reports directly to the president about the activities of FAS. And that's one thing that it bites Isaac in the back much later because it's a parallel structure that is well funded. But you then end up having the situation where FAS agents were driving GD6 cars. They were living in hotels. They were throwing parties with strippers and with Moet and all of these things. And officers were employed to do that job are struggling to eat a $2 meal per day, right? So you had a scenario where that caused quite a significant loss of morale. And I think just after the election, Isaac realizes this and he pulls funding from FAS. But ultimately, yes, FAS is run as a project that is directed by the deputy DG.
And he has also said these deputy directors led up in a fight.
Yeah. Heated confrontations, yes, about strategy and so forth. Yeah, they did. Yes, and that was specifically with regards to his refusal to sanction opposition members being taken out. He didn't think it was effective. He didn't think it was smart. He didn't think it was wise. And when he resisted this, they said quite blatantly, you're not operative. But it's not just that. There were also a number of occasions, for example, where there was criticism that he didn't always act fast enough. Operatives, what they do is how they're trained. They're almost trained like soldiers. So they rely on a hunch. If they think someone is a security threat, or in this case, a threat to the president's interests, they want to neutralize that threat very quickly, extremely quickly. That's what they're trained to do. However, Isaac introduces these protocols. And these protocols basically, one agent I spoke to said he felt like his arms were tied behind his back, because should he do anything remotely looking like violence, he's going to have to write report after report and justify why he's taken that. And they start criticizing him to say, you are introducing a lot of red tape, and it means our officers can't function because they're always being second guessed. Whereas in the field, they don't need to be second guessed. They need to be able to spot what they think is a problem and do what needs to be done. So that creates quite a lot of tension. Now obviously, Tapfumane is coming from a background of the military. So he's a soldier. He's trained to identify threat, eliminate threat, neutralize threat. And he obviously doesn't support that, right? Similarly with Deputy Director Mastulela, he also believes, being an operative, that you need to spot a problem, act on a problem, and he feels that this is not happening.
And recently we saw the then boss of Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Now
he is now the new DG. Now the thing with him that people don't actually realize is he has a very long-standing history with the president. When he was stationed in Kwekwe and he was officer in charge of the CIO, he was very close to ED. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but at every police station in the country, there is an office of the president within the police station, and that office of the president is basically CIO. If you actually walk in and say, I want to go to the president's office, they will direct you to the CIO office. So he's OIC in Kwekwe of that particular division of the CIO. He comes back to Harare. At one point, he's officer in charge at Harare Central. Then he moves on later. Then he actually becomes a commandant at the CIO training school, the one that we revealed is in Masasa Park. And he runs that. So he has a very strong, extensive history with the president. So he has about the same loyalty as Isaac. But secondly, he has a lot of respect, because you would probably say maybe 80% of the CIOs today, they've passed through his hands. He's trained them. And he is a good administrator, as well. People think he'd be a lot more efficient than Isaac. When he was at Zimparks, when he showed up, people familiar with the situation say people hadn't been paid for 7 months or something like that. He sorted that out within 2 months. And he transformed the way that Zimparks was being run. Even basic things like ivory smuggling have gone down. Elephants are not being poisoned by cyanide. So he's generally good at his job. And there's a lot of excitement. And since coming in, to be fair to him, it's maybe just about a month since he's been in. He has started to ring in some very, very important changes, bringing in young people. I'm told that the CIO now acts quite a lot faster than before. He's removed what a lot of people are calling Isaac's red tape, and he's trying to shorten that chain of command that officers can act on a hunch. But he's a very professional leader, and he's expected to remain that way.
Yeah, he then comes in, but we don't see anything or design.
So there's confusion there. He comes in. There's the circular that CIO has a new leader, but people are not quite sure, because the circular says he's the new director of the president's department. CIO is the president's office. So given that FAS was parallel, people are not sure if it's a parallel structure or not. And the circular doesn't mention the fate of Isaac Moyo either. It's silent on that. And he comes in, and he doesn't immediately go to Chaminuka building. And Chaminuka building is the headquarters of the CIO. He starts working out of Chapman House and not Charterhouse and not Chaminuka building. And there's no handover takeover. And that situation persists for about a fortnight. It actually ends up being Isaac who phones him to say, can we do a handover takeover? Because at that time, Isaac's not received his termination paperwork, so he's still reporting for work. So eventually, they privately, arranged to do a handover, takeover. But again, the fate of Isaac is still pretty silent.
Why is the president silent about Isaac's position?
There's generally been a lot of silence with Mnangagwa when he's removed people from positions, unless there is, another backstory. I think maybe part of it, and I can't speak for him, I guess maybe part of it he thinks it reduces humiliation. But there hasn't been much said. There've been quite a lot of assignments, or reassignments, especially among ambassadors, assignments among presidential envoys, for instance, and they never get announced. It happens, and if you're not in the know, you don't quite know. So I don't know why that's not been announced. I think the understanding is they'll announce when he's being shifted elsewhere. Now, one thing that I'll say is, look, when Isaac gets fired, we get these reports from people like Lieutenant Martin Yarare saying there's tension, he was working with the French and this and that, and I'll tell you now that that's not true. And the relationship between Isaac Moyo and Emerson Mnangagwa remains pretty strong. They have a personal relationship. I think both him and Isaac understand that this was a professional decision. It needed to be made. It's got nothing to do with how they see each other personally. The people around the president have a lot of respect for Isaac. The guy is a stalwart. I think one analyst, I can't remember what his name was, but it's quite a respected analyst. He wrote, I think in a conversation or something, he wrote that Isaac was a giant of African intelligence and diplomacy. So he's respected, quite a lot. And they might be an appointment down the road.
And you talk about the new DG and what were called Isaac's relatives. Are we heading toward a violent?
Are we going back to violence? I don't think so. But I think what he's doing is trying to make the CIO extremely effective. And he's trying to lift up the morale, especially around his officers. The red tape's been removed in terms of the amount of authorizations you need, for instance, for a financial officer or a finance sector to release funds for an officer to travel and to do something on the road. Certainly, we've had no indication that the policy, for instance, to say CIOs cannot carry their IDs outside of the building, that policy is still in place. That's not been removed. I don't quite know about the protocol of justifying force, but I don't imagine we'll see it, because I think when the handover takeover is being done, there's quite a general agreement that Isaac has brought a lot of professionalism to the CIO that was gone. The CIO were thugs. That's just the truth. They were a bunch of thugs until Isaac came in. And I think the new DG is going to want to keep that. But what he wants to do is to drive more results in the quickest period of time, and to also have the CIO being a little autonomous. Like I'm saying, one thing that really alarmed a lot of people around the CIO is that story of Isaac saying the president said don't interfere, and a lot of people in security were saying that is risky. You can't do that because the president is not on the ground. He could lose. He will tell you to fold your arms and he will lose. You don't disobey an order, but you listen to him and say, okay, we've heard you, but you get up and you go and you do what needs to be done. So that's what you will see. That's what you'll see with the new DG. You'll see a lot of effectiveness, a lot of efficiency, and a lot of results.
Thank you so much. It was
It is. It's always insightful talking about Zim intelligence. It's always insightful doing some digging up. So on to the next story. So yeah, I'm Maynard Manyo. That was me in conversation with my colleague at Dug Up about the story that you've read today. We have a Substack. Please subscribe it, because I don't always post the updates in time. We also have a YouTube, if that's a thing. You're probably seeing this on YouTube, but if not, we have a YouTube. You can subscribe to that. We also have a GoFundMe if you want to keep supporting us so that this stuff can remain free for everybody. Then head over to our GoFundMe. But yeah, thanks a lot. We're picking up our shovels and we are going back to digging up.